Friday, 11th of the 5th, 2018. I saw a play today, in school. A professional play came in town or something, and the school let us see the play during school hours. It's the first professional play I had seen, and I find it to be an interesting medium. I'm quite impressed by the ability of those acting in the play to work so perfectly with no break, 1.5 hours of flawless acting. The story that was told was that of the trenches, the ANZAC of the Great War. As an Australian, I have been told many times that the diggers of Australia and New Zealand, their fight as a new country to prove themselves in the First World War. We do not necessarily look at the war with much sense of victory. Anzac Day is a day of respect and commemoration for those who died in the Great War, and all wars after. The Battle of Gallipoli was something where both sides suffered great losses. The only real victory was our retreat. The play was not chronological, and I found it hard to stay along with the story. He was an Australian. He enlisted for the war. One thing that is mentioned often in World War I is that early on, many thought it would be over soon. Australians enlisted for many reasons. Some to prove the might of their then young country, some because of hard times, and others for the sake of adventure. The man in the play, his mates, they're all young. One was just 17, but I heard that some as young as 14 managed to lie about their age and enlist. They're in Egypt for a while, trained, I think, for when they would finally fight the war. Australia is such a young country, and the people that died in the trenches of World War I matched that young age. Those soldiers didn't know fear. That story had the man deal with the horrors of the trenches, of losing mates. He lost his hand, souvenir of the war that would never go away. The Great War showed people, not just Australia, how there was no real glory to war. No side won in the Battle of Gallipoli. Both the Turks and the Anzacs lost many lives, and left either crippled or shell-shocked or both. World War I and II claimed many of the Anzacs' lives. We call them the Lost Generation, as a generation that fought in the wars had their lives lost either literally or through the trauma of battle. I'm only producing this from memory. Only trying to recollect what has been said through not only all the time spent learning it in school multiple times in the few years of my life, but also in everyday life. On Anzac Day, in various incomplete lists of names printed on stone in Perth, Drayton and across the country. War is not a resort, not only with the trauma of those who fought and their families, but also economically. War is not effective in gaining what is needed, not like trade. I released the first podcast today. I got a little sleep as I had to set everything up, and so it was likely 1 AM when I finally fell asleep. Although my watch claims I laid rest at 10 PM, which only works to further my distrust for the device. I wear 2 watches at once now, the one that tells the date in different order, and the one that fails to track my sleep correctly. They fall on different wrists. It is not long before I go to Perth for a few days. Perth, the only place in Western Australia when it comes to population, the only city, really, if you don't count regional ones. I'll be going there for Aspire, and it will be my second time doing so. I'm excited for such a trip. Firstly because it features a free trip to Perth, and flights in Australia do not come cheap, although a car has its own drawbacks. It's 12 hours from Newman to Perth. A plane will traverse those 1,200 kilometres in just 1.5. I'm also eager for a take 2 of the trip, not that the last one went wrong. It's just nice to try the same thing twice. Sunday, 13th of the 5th, 2018. 2 days of getting up at 3 AM, and I'll sum them both up here. Saturday, had my jumper on under my uniform. I struggled to wake up as I usually do. But on the way to work, I took the opportunity to film myself skating in the nighttime background. I only use my phone when I film, so the ISO made the video fuzzy, and the contrast between the bright streetlights and the dark encompassment meant that the video showed mostly just bright orange, white light and black. That is how it feels though. Although it is light enough to make out shapes not drenched in artificial brightness, I like the feel of seeing myself disappear upon skating away from the beam of long stained lights. The day so and went. A rush came in at the final hour, but I handled it. After work I was dead tired, even more so than usual, and resided in little creative work. Hence why I recall the events on Sunday. I don't know how I managed to wake up on Sunday. My tiredness was substantial. I remembered that much this morning. It took a little while. I think most people who would listen to this knows the feeling a person has upon being so tired upon the alarm. What is the harm in a little more rest, after all? For me, not that much. I have on occasion fallen back asleep upon waking up for work. On both occasions I woke up with time to open still left. That extra hour of time used up, but still time to get there and open on time. Yesterday I was tired. Today isn't much of an exception. I'll persist on trying to get things like this done because I want it done. I want it to exist and be out there. There'll be stuff I won't tell, things I forget. There is so much that happens each and every day that they'll never be recalled, and so only the interesting will be told, and the interesting will be what is heard. But what people find interesting is what they were told was interesting. One thing I think is an undervalued subject of school is health studies. I do not know about the rest of the world. I don't even know about the rest of my state, but I'm lucky to learn about values, about attitudes and beliefs, and how there is nothing inherent in right and wrong. I think that it is important to understand where our values come from. Not that it is bad to have core values, that the sense of right and wrong is, well, wrong. No, it is important to have values, but important even more to know they can change because society changes. And keeping the same values throughout your whole life in this ever-shifting society will leave you bitter, leave you resentful of the society as a whole. The effect is real. Even when in a new society, your values might now be wrong. They still affect you. It causes real harm to you to not be able to continue changing, because not changing purposely would just change you into a resentful creature. But what do I know? I'm just 16. I have many years of change ahead of me yet, and if CGB Grey has it his way, maybe more than anyone has had before. Maybe if I keep telling uninteresting stories, I'll eventually be considered interesting. John Green says that if you pay enough attention to something, it can suddenly become fascinating. John Green says words in a way that penetrates my thinking. It makes me consider things. Monday, 14th of the 5th, 2018. I wasted away the rest of my night, and a fair amount of data watching YouTube videos. I did not sleep until near midnight. I woke at 7:30 AM, had breakfast, and went to school. When described, it sounds the same as every day before it. Stay up late, wake up and rush out. Of course, in reality, everything is different. From the subtle changes in movement and even more subtle changes in my body, to the incomprehensible existential changes in the universe as we move around the sun around the galaxy, and the whole universe moves through itself, expanding faster and faster, slowly but surely. We don't describe those changes. We claim that each step is a step the same because it bears the same description of movement. We generalize, which is useful, as I do not wish to hear every subtlety of every action, of every space at every time, and how they compare to one another. That day was described as the same, but of course I could tell you many differences. My hair was shorter, cut yesterday, out of no more than necessity, and my room had its furniture rearranged, just to name a broad too. When we put things succinctly, we lose details. An image tells 1,000 words. Tuesday, 15th of the 5th, 2018. I have this spot during recess and lunch of school that I used to write on my Chromebook. In my school experience, lockers were not a thing, at least until this year, where I discovered that the upper school uses lockers. In my school, there are 10 lockers on the second floor of the library room, a row of 5 stacked with another row of 5. In a corner of that second floor, I found a fantastic place of little disturbance. First thing I tried with the small area in the corner was to give short naps a go, where I'd take a small dose of caffeine and close my eyes to white noise for 10 minutes. This is an idea I got from the Cortex podcast. I figured I might as well give it a go, see if I could reduce my lack of energy during school. I don't know how effective it was, so I stopped in favour of this Chromebook. I still sometimes have a small amount of caffeine. I couldn't find caffeine tablets at the shops, even though later a friend pointed their location to me, which made my many hours of searching the medicine aisle of the shop feel quite dumb. So I ended up purchasing a small bottle of some liquid that, when milk is added, makes a cold mocha. Although I've been drinking small amounts minus the milk to get my dose, I'm also unsure of the effectiveness of caffeine for maintaining my energy, as the only noticeable difference I can identify of the effects of this drug is a reduction in my already low coordination, especially my hands. I don't know if I'll ever try napping again here. I'm not in this part of school every break. I'm usually only here at recess, and even then, it's not every time. I don't pay attention often to my own world. Pay attention to the red dirt I spent 8 years in, sure. Pay attention to the things I've done over and over. While not to what is happening around me, I don't pay attention to dates. I have exams coming up and I can't even bother to remember when. They are soon. I never study for tests or pay attention to a schedule. I don't look into that stuff. Only ever the short version. What I am doing this period, what I am doing now, or for the rest of the day. I do not plan ahead. I do not prepare, which while seeming nice can be problematic. I don't know what will become of me in the future. I frankly don't mind most of the options likely for me. I'm a lucky individual. I'm not only in a wealthy country, but also in the wealthy part of a country, although not in the typical manner. Most of those that work at the mine of the Pilbara are those who come to make it rich, as to drag someone out here takes money. The trade-off is this place, this town. Money doesn't always make up for the sacrifices of mental health of the people working 12-hour shifts at the mine, usually hard labour roles, in the 40-degree heat, 4 days on, 4 days off, rotating between night and day shift. Some people don't come home for family, say away in Perth or maybe in another state. I wouldn't know this directly, of course. I make coffee, working either 3 or 5 hours casual in a small building with 2 air cons in continuous blasts and podcasts always able to be played over the speakers. Pilbara has problems with mental health, among other things. And what can I do but smile to every customer and ensure their drink was made good enough for the long day or long night? It's not why I work. I don't really think about it much in that way. But even if it's not something I think about, it's still a way I inadvertently affect things. The world is bloody complicated, I can say that much. So much goes on in the background and foreground that if it were like a painting, the canvas would be black and drenched wet from the infinite licks of paint inflicted on the sheet. We have to compete with the function of the universe, how we form these beliefs about how the world works from our values, how they show in our attitudes, and how we can shape those attitudes as well as others. Then we look at the history and the vast aspects of the world are squared, as we look at what happened and all the factors as how to it happened, and how we can now see it today, and how it will look tomorrow and the next day. People sometimes generalize this. Science does its best to control for as much of it as possible. Others just give up and let the chaos happen. This, of course, is also a generalization. The world is easier that way. Not better, but easier. I have options, that much I know. I'm not the luckiest person odd, but I sure as hell am up there, somewhere. But I don't know how to focus my attention right here. Focus it somewhere the rest of the world isn't watching, that isn't myself. That's it, isn't it? The lucky people struggle to focus on the things those lucky enough with a voice to speak, or what they themselves are. And you have the lucky people focusing on the lucky people keeping the lucky lucky. I'm unfairly tired. I struggled through a maths test, which has left a lasting furrow of concentration on my face, though I did not concentrate at all afterward, and resided in finishing my edit of Skyrim while listening to podcasts. Drained. Hey, me from the kind of present but also past. Yeah, kind of also future. Depends on your perspective, really. I'd like to thank everyone for the support and advice for the podcast, and yeah.